on somebody's flannel shirt.
For sure. Or the copper quality in the door handle. All right, I'm starting on page 161.
Okay.
And this is Swanns Way.
Swanns Way?
Swanns Way.
Swanns Way, not Sway, right?
Yes. Swanns Way. I suppose a little recap would be helpful. We're following our main character, who is, from what I can understand, a semi-autobiographical rendition of Proust as a child, or an imagination thereof. And he's guiding us through the social...
Somebody got with it.
Oh yeah, Mom combined those. Like the social conventions and like the foliage that grows around and like how he walks about the town and his interactions with his family and people. Anyway, here we go.
So it's a snapshot of him walking through his hometown as a kid.
Yeah. And the different experiences that one feels.
And the dialogue that he thinks he would have had.
Yeah.
That he didn't have because he's writing about something that never happened.
I'm not sure as far as that. Proust was kind of a fun case.
He's not dysfunctional?
He like hid up in, he was terribly allergic to things. And so he would, maybe I'm mixing my histories. I'm going to research that before I say it out loud again.
Dickens was sort of antisocial. A lot of his stuff, he was anti-organizational.
Oh, me too.
I mean, Oliver Twist was written to slap the public about the workhouses that were existing in his time.
Come on, y'all, let's be better than this.
Yeah, and of course Poe was just a broken-hearted alcoholic. And I don't know, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was probably not. He was very scattered in his focus.
And
then my other Robert Frost goes from really difficult prose to follow to just absolutely gorgeous poems.
Yeah.
And and talk about a pendulum swing. You're wanting so Proust can do what he wants.
Yeah. Okay, This pleasure does not exist, isolated, distinct, and formulated in the mind as the aim we are pursuing when we approach a woman, as the cause of the previous disturbance that we felt. He was talking about this imagined interaction between a woman of the town that he's walking through and how much lovelier the imagination of that event might be than the actuality of it. And the distinction between any woman and a woman native to that area. We scarcely even contemplate it as a pleasure which we will enjoy. Rather, we call it her charm, for we do not think of ourselves, we think only of leaving ourselves. Obscurely awaited, inanimate, and hidden, it merely rouses to such a paroxysm at the moment of its realization. The other pleasures we find in the soft gazes, the kisses of the woman close to us, that it seems to us, more than anything else, a sort of transport of our gratitude for our companion's goodness of heart and for her touching predilection for us, which we measure by the blessings, by the beatitude she showers upon us. Alas, it was in vain that I implored the castle.
Beatitudes or beatitudes?
Beatitudes. Okay. Alas, it was in vain that I implored the castle keep of Roussainville, that I asked it to have some child from its village to come to me, appealing to it as to the only confidant I had of my earliest desires, when at the top of our house in Combray, in the little room smelling of orris root, I could see nothing.
Smelling of what?
Orris root.
Orris, okay.
I could see nothing but its tower in the middle of the pane of the half-open window, while the heroic hesitations of a traveler embarking on an exploration or of a desperate man killing himself with a feeling of faintness. I would clear an unknown and, I thought, fatal path within myself, until the moment when a natural trail, like that left by a snail, added itself to the leaves of the black current that I leaned in toward.
Keep going.
In vain did I appeal to it now. In vain did I hope the whole expanse of the country before me, within the field of my vision, draining it with my eyes, which tried to extract a woman from it. I would go as far as the porch of Saint André de Champs, which is one of the chapels. There I would never find the country woman I would inevitably have met had I been with my grandfather, and therefore prevented from striking up a conversation with her.
Yeah, being with your grandfather kind of puts water on what's
Yeah.
on meeting a girl. Hey, babe, you want to go to the tavern and have a slug, you know?
With me and my granddad. I would stare endlessly at the trunk of a distant tree, from behind which she was going to appear and come to me. The scanned horizon would remain uninhabited, night would fall hopelessly, my attention would attach itself as though to aspirate the creatures they might harbor to that sterile ground, to that exhausted earth. And it was no longer with a light heart, but with a rage, that I struck the trees of Rosenville woods, from among which no more living creatures emerged than if they had been trees painted on the canvas of a panorama. When, unable to resign myself to going back to the house without having held in my arms the woman I had so desired, I was nevertheless obliged to continue along the road to Combray, admitting to myself that there was less and less chance that she had been placed in my path. And if she had been there, would I have dared talk to her? It seemed to me she would have thought I was mad. I no longer believed that the desires which I formed during my walks, and which were not fulfilled, were shared by other people, that they had any reality outside of me. They now seemed to me no more than the purely subjective, impotent, illusory creations of my temperament. They no longer had any attachment to nature, to reality, which from then on lost all its charm and significance. There was no more than a conversational framework for my life, as if, for the fiction of a novel, the railway carriage on the seat of which a traveler reads it in order to kill time.
So my imaginary walk that took me, you could write that in about 2 sentences without all the...
I took a walk and my imagination ran wild.
Yeah, or, you know, I met a gorgeous girl, and, you know, or I met this gorgeous guy, you could, you know.
I think there's an important distinction that he's made, though, that, like, he's taken us on a journey of youth.
Yeah, this is what I fully understand.
We all have had this, like, moment of fantasy and then realization that
he fills in a lot of details that everybody else is. I mean, you're going, yeah, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, I understand. It's well written. It's just, but
it's also a little wordy, for sure.
Well, but it wasn't wordy when it came out of his mind and threw his fingers onto the paper.
Exactly.
You see, it was just letting the thoughts.
Letting it flow,
yeah.
Come out.
What is it they call that in?
Huh?
Did you finish reading?
No, but this is going to be a loose one, conversational. I'm going to read another
Okay.
paragraph.
You can do what, and I'll keep listening, and I'll may comment less.
No, it's okay.
But I'm watching.
Eggs.
Yeah, you'll have to put up with me shelling them.
No worries.
You can keep reading though.
Okay. It was perhaps from an impression received also near Montjouvain a few years later, an impression that remained obscure to me at the time, that there emerged well after the idea which I formed of sadism. As will be seen later, for quite other reasons, the memory of this impression was to play an important part in my life. It was during a spell of very hot weather. My parents, who had to leave for the whole day, had told me to return home as late as I pleased. And having gone as far as the Montjouvain pond, where I liked to look at the reflections of the roof tiles, I had lain down in the shade and fallen asleep among the bushes of the hillock that overlooks the house, in the same spot where I had once waited for my father on a day when he had gone to see Monsieur Ventois. It was almost night when I awoke. I wanted to stand up, but I saw Mademoiselle Ventois, insofar as I actually recognized her, because I had not seen her. Very well often in Combray, and only when she was still a child. Whereas now,
Well, only when she was
still a child.
Oh,
Whereas now she was growing into a young woman, who had probably just come home opposite me, a few inches from me, in the room in which her father had entertained my father, and which she had made into her own little drawing room. The window was half open, the lamp was lit. I could see her every movement without her seeing me, but if I had gone away, I would have made rustling sounds among the bushes. She would have heard me, and she might have thought I had hidden there to spy on her. She was in deep mourning because her father had died a short time before. We had not gone to see her. My mother had not wanted to, because of a virtue of hers which alone limited the effects of her goodness. It's been implied that Mademoiselle Ventois is having relations with another woman. Her sense of decency, but she pitied her deeply. My mother recalled the sad end of Monsieur Ventois' life, completely absorbed as it was in giving his daughter the care of a mother or nursemaid. Then, in the suffering his daughter had caused him, she could still see the tormented expression on the old man's face during that last period. She knew he had entirely given up completing the task of transcribing in clean copies all his work of the last few years, insignificant pieces by an old piano teacher, by a former village organist, which we could well imagine had scarcely any value in themselves, but which we did not disdain because they had so much value for him, having been his reason for living before the sacrifice he made for his daughter, and which, for the most part not even written down, preserved only in his memory, a few jotted on scattered pieces of paper, unreadable, would remain unknown. My mother thought of that order, even crueler renunciation, which had been forced upon Monsieur Ventois, the renunciation of a future of decent and respectable happiness for his daughter. When she remembered all this extreme distress on the part of my aunt's old piano teacher, she was moved by real sorrow and thought the horror of the far more bitter sorrow that Mademoiselle Ventois must be feeling, mingled as it was with the remorse at having more or less killed her father. Poor Monsieur Ventois, my mother would say, he lived and died for his daughter, without getting any reward for it. Will he get it after his death? In what form? It could only come to him from her. That's where I'm gonna end for today.
How much was left on your timer?